Bike Scoop, our weekly show here at Performance Bicycle, where we talk about all the latest and greatest fun things that are happening in our lives that we're excited about and that we want to share with you. Today I'm joined by Eddie from our product team. He's also one of the more experienced mechanics here in the building.
Thank you.
Eddie, thanks for joining us.
Definitely glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So today we're talking about carbon. All right, we're talking about the benefits of carbon versus like aluminum and steel and tie. We're talking about the strength of carbon and how to cut it, what to do and what not to do. And so I think it's important to call out that, at some point in your carbon bike's life, you may have to retire. Usually it's 10 years down the road. They have a huge, long lifespan. But sometimes things can happen. So there are proper ways to get rid of these bikes when it's time to get rid of them.
Yeah, you really don't want to go riding a bike that may have a crack somewhere. Carbon doesn't really have a fatigue life like aluminum, but there still are some concerns. Parts where it's bonded to metal can sometimes come loose. You can have a little bit of corrosion issue with some of the metal pieces inside the carbon for dropouts, for instance, around bottle cage bolts. But for the most part, they'll last a really long time. But when you need to get rid of it, you need to get rid of it.
Absolutely. So this bike is a bike that we have that we need to get rid of. So this frame was damaged in shipping. It's a bike frame that we cannot sell, and it's not safe. And so we have to get rid of it appropriately. Now, if you work in a shop or if you're a personal user, you avid cyclist who understands all this, the proper way to do this is with a hacksaw, right? And there's specific blades that you can use for carbon if you want, but any hacksaw really will do.
For the most part, yep.
So if your bike frame is damaged, the best thing to do again is to just saw it right in half, starting with the top tube and then to the down tube. That's the right way to do it. Mm-hmm. Today, though, we have a dual purpose. One, we need to get rid of this frame. Two, we need to demonstrate how strong carbon really is.
We're pretty lucky.
So we're going to show you guys how not to take a bike frame apart, but we're also going to demonstrate the strength. So these are two tools that you probably would not use to cut carbon, but today, like I said, we get to demonstrate the strength of it. So we're going to start here, I think, with this hammer, and let's see here. Let's start with this side. So it's pretty loud. Is it cracked though? I don't think so. So if you need to tell, the best way to do is take like a nickel or a quarter, and you can tap it. So hopefully the mic will pick it up. So it's a nice loud sound. As we get, it got a little muffled, so like the tone went down just a little bit. And if you go over here, but it's not consistent, so you can tell that with that small hit, it was a pretty hard hit, it may have caused some damage, but it hasn't totally broken through the frame.
I would call this bike still rideable.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that it's already busted.
Right, aside from that.
Yeah.
So let's give it a little bit more. Still no dents there. Still nothing. Getting harder and harder. I've got a few marks there, but still no visible signs of wear. And there I finally got some cracks in the paint. So where'd that penny go? Let's go back here. Now you can definitely hear it. So I am definitely putting like some weight in it. Now this bike probably would still hold weight a little bit, but it's not something that you would want to ride. Definitely. All right. So let's just keep going. Let's just see. Ugh. Still not totally breaking. You want to take a swing at it?
Let me see this thing.
There it goes.
Yeah, that's pretty done right there.
Yeah, you definitely would not want to ride this now, but it's still like mostly intact here. It's still not coming apart. It hasn't separated. So therefore we'll take kind of like the pedal wrench to it, I guess.
That'll probably chop it in half.
Oh, there we go. The last one finally got through. So that shows just how strong this is. Now, we obviously would not recommend you to do this at home. We're here as professionals demonstrating it. The proper way, again, is with a hacksaw to the top. And this is going to show just how easy a hacksaw cuts through this carbon. There we go. Boom. That's done.
Done.
All right, so that's an important point, is that hacksaws cut through carbon really easily. And that's why we're going to use them as a proper tool to cut through carbon in here just a second. All right, so we just showed how strong it is. Why would someone want to ride a carbon frame?
Well, there are obvious weight advantages to carbon fiber. There's definitely a strength and a kind of an engineering benefit. Yeah, you can really be specific on where the bike is going to be stiff in certain areas down here around the dropout, just to mitigate some of those pedaling forces. You also want to, create a little bit of flexibility, maybe back here in the seat stays. It's going to allow for a smoother ride. And it also depends on the type of carbon you're using. There's a couple different types. There's a high modulus and a low modulus. Most companies are going to be using a low modulus, and it's just mostly how the carbon is laid out. So it comes out in sheets, and then they take those sheets, and depending on the direction of the carbon fibers, they can layer those in certain areas in a certain way. They call it a carbon layup schedule, and that's pretty much going to give you the characteristics of the bike that you want.
Gotcha.
So pretty much the most, along that with the carbon in there, there's also the resin that's going to kind of bind the carbon together, give it a little bit of flexibility, give it some durability, and that is pretty much, where'd that top of that thing go? It's kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with fiberglass or anything like that. It's very, very similar, but they pretty much take all of these layers and lay them together, and then they put a big bag in here and inflate it and put it in a mold and squeeze it and apply some heat, and that pretty much cures the resin, and then you're pretty much locked in.
Yeah. And you can see kind of those layers here that are kind of threading out from here. So you can, once it's cut through, you can almost pull them out if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And so some benefits of riding carbon is that typically it's a little bit more comfortable, more compliant than like an aluminum frame, right? Steel frames are also really comfortable. Tie frames can be really comfortable, but carbon is really lightweight. It's really comfortable.
Easy to work with too.
Easy to work with. And then I'm a more like recreational upright. I like to cruise around the countryside, go down some dirt roads when I want to. So I have one of the lower modulus style frames, as shown back here. There's also high mod frames that are better for crit racing and stuff like that. Those are a little bit harder on the back, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we just talked about some of the signs of failure. Again, if you're just tuning in, this is the Bike Soup. Happens every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And today we're talking about the proper way to take apart a carbon bike once it's been damaged. Again, this one was damaged in shipping, and we needed to destroy it, so that's why we did it. But now we're going to kind of talk about all the component parts on a bike and what you can cut and what you shouldn't cut, right?
Usually you're going to cut like a mountain bike handlebar. You're going to cut down your steer tube if you're getting a new bike. Again, we can do this at our stores. If you ever needed to, bring it in. We'll cut these down for you. A few things you'll need. You're going to need some sort of a guide to make sure your cut is accurate. Probably going to want to measure where you're cutting quite a few times to make sure. It's super easy to cut a little more off. It's not so easy to put it back on.
Yeah, that's true. That's totally true. But there's all kinds of, this bike has got almost all carbon. So it's got a carbon frame. This one actually has aluminum bars, but I'll put carbon bars on it. I would not cut down the carbon road bars. There's not typically any point to do that. It has a carbon stem. I would not cut the carbon stem. It has a carbon seat post. In some cases, you might need to cut a carbon seat post.
Rider fit, want to bring it down a little bit.
Consult with your bike fitter on that if you didn't know that already. The saddle has carbon rails on it. I would not cut that. And you can get, even carbon wheels. So you can almost get everything with carbon on it these days. But the primary things that you're going to want to cut, again, if for some reason you work in a shop or you're a home DIYer and for some reason the bike is destroyed, you're going to want to cut it in half so no one rides it, so they're not riding a faulty frame. But the other common ones are going to be the steer tube, which is the piece that's inside of here, which Eddie just showed, which we can just kind of show that if you're not familiar with it. This piece goes up through there and is all carbon. That's, like you said, probably the most common thing that people are going to cut, because when the bikes come in, this is really tall because you need to get it fit properly, and some people want it higher and some people want it lower.
Yeah, different size bikes are going to have taller head tubes, so you're going to need to accommodate that by trimming it down some.
Yeah.
And another thing a carbon fork is going to have is going to be this little expander nut insert.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's going to go in there. Carbon doesn't really like to be squished that hard, so you want to reinforce it some. So that's going to go in the top there after you've got it cut, and that'll kind of reinforce the inside a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. And then you mentioned mountain bike handlebars. So again, this is cut based on rider fit and like how aggressive or upright you want to be and where your stem position is going to go. If you're not familiar with that information, you're going to want to consult with your bike fitter. And then the other most common one are the mountain bike handlebars that start out pretty wide and go down lower.
Kind of along with that, a lot of the manufacturers of carbon handlebars now are actually putting little marks on the end, just so you kind of get an even mark on either side. You can use that to kind of gauge how much you need to cut off. But you'd still want to a guide for that, of course.
Okay, and then run us back through like the common tools that you're going to need to do this.
Well, of course, you need the guide. Nice to have a little vise to get your guide into. They do make a couple pretty nice carbon specific blades. I personally don't use these because I feel like with a normal 32 tooth per inch blade, you can get a pretty good solid cut with that, and it fits in our guides much better. So we'll use that. We'll also have a little bit of sandpaper to kind of finish and clean up the surface that we've cut. I've heard of stories of people putting a little super glue on the end of the cuts also. I don't know if that's necessary, but then you're also going to need some sort of torque wrench to get that thing back together.
Super important.
Carbon, again, does not really like to be squished that hard. You want to kind of watch your torques. You don't want to ham fist it and get too tight.
Because it'll crack the frame.
It'll crack the frame.
So always use a torque wrench.
It's kind of hard to tell sometimes if somebody's gotten it a little bit too tight.
It's a really important point here is that if you are at home doing DIY stuff, each manufacturer has recommended torque specs. So like this bike, and typically it's on the component or it's on the bike, it's on the piece that you're messing with. So the example here is on this seat post clamp, it says right here 4 Newton meters. That's all that this can take. Yeah. And so if you're hand tightening, it's pretty good chance that you could go past 4. If you crack it, there's a chance that some bike companies might not manufacture the warranty.
Right.
Or take the warranty, right?
Correct,
because they misuse
if
of
you're not doing it right, they're not.
So always use a torque wrench, but chances are that probably won't happen. But
a safe bet though, 4 to 5 Newton meters, about 50 inch-pounds, I believe, is a pretty good benchmark for most of the components on your bike, unless noted otherwise. So we kind of have some of these kind of put together for us. This steer tube here, I have actually marked with a mark. Get your guide on there.
A key point here is measure 5 times, cut 4 times. So always start wide if it's handlebars, or tall if it's a steer tube or a seat post, and work your way down, because once it's gone, you can't make it taller.
Right. So another cool thing about carbon is it's very repairable. There are a couple companies out there that do offer that service. Typically, that's going to void any manufacturer's warranty you're going to have from the actual bike frame manufacturer. However, there's Calfee Design does a really good job of doing carbon repair, and most of those companies are going to have a warranty for their specific repair that they've done.
Gotcha. And just to kind of run through this kind of up close, this is the guide. Again, you don't want to just like hold this thing with a hacksaw and go. So measure it out, figure out where you want to cut it. Eddie had drawn the mark there. You're going to mark it, and then you're going to slide this guide over top of it. Again, it kind of shows right there where you're going to go, and you just line up this kind of gap right here with where the mark is, and then you can clamp it down. And just for video purposes, you can see this slot there, and this just slides in to cut it, right? So you're just kind of like right like that, boom, boom, boom. And let's cut this one just to demonstrate it. It's pretty easy. Again, you don't want to just hold it and saw it, so that's why the vise is great. These little clamps are super important. Mark it, tape it, measure 5 times, cut 4 times. So we've done that here.
Done it here. I'll typically start my cut with pretty slow, even, no pressure strokes.
Just to kind of get the groove.
Get the groove going, and then kind of once you get through that top layer, you can kind of give it a little bit more. Again,
you can't
really
see it, but it's just slicing right through it, just like it's
I'm letting the blade do the work.
A butter knife with soft butter.
Getting towards the end, I'm going to start slowing down a little bit, just so I don't fray the end of the cut.
So start slow and steady through the middle process, and then slow down towards the end. And this is in an effort not to splinter the pieces that we showed earlier, how this is right here. You don't want to splinter that when you're cutting it down. So
there's your super good clean cut.
Yeah, it looks really good. Nice. That's really nice.
And again, I'd hit the end of this on some sandpaper, kind of clean it up some, give the edges, inside and outside edges, a little bit of a chamfer so you don't snag it on anything. This stuff will kind of come apart on you if you're not careful. But there you go.
Yeah, and the sandpaper cleans it up.
Yep.
Then you could drop your cap in if you needed to, or your mountain bike in-bar plugs.
Put your bars on there. Another good thing to use, carbon components are a little bit slippery, so sometimes your clamping force isn't quite enough to keep it in place. One good spot up here will be up on your stem here. You can kind of help mitigate some of those issues by putting this. It's actually a friction. It creates more friction, so you don't have to add as much torque pretty much to keep your components in place.
Exactly. And I've found like over time it can also come into play here on the, so I have a carbon seat post here going into the seat tube, so it's carbon on carbon. And if I just didn't use paste, carbon paste, clamped it down to spec, over time it can actually slide down and start hurting your knees and your back and all that kind of stuff. So carbon paste is super good. Anytime it's carbon on carbon. So cool. That's it. If you're just tuning in for some reason, again, this is the Performance Bike Scoop. It happens every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the Performance Bicycle Warehouse. Today we're in the cage talking about carbon, how strong it is, how to properly take apart a carbon bicycle if it's damaged. Again, this bicycle was damaged in shipping and we needed to destroy it, so we had the benefit of doing that today on camera. It was super fun. Eddie, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad
really
to be here.
appreciate it. And again, if this is all like mind-baffling, go into our stores. We can do this for you in our stores. No problem at all. Eddie, thanks a lot.
Yep, you're welcome.
And everyone, tune in next week, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we're going to talk about the fact that just because you ride bikes all the time doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy and fit. So we're going to talk about all the things you need to do on top of riding your bike to not get injured.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
You going to take another swing at it?
Definitely.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.